Hello, this is Vinay, and today we are going to learn what is an IP address and their classification. So, what is an IP address? Now, IP address is a unique identity of a computer in the wide area network, or you can call it internet. So whenever I'm saying wide area network or internet, do not get confused, because what happens in the wide area network, when two or more local area network gets connected, it forms a wide area network. So whether you call it wide area network or internet, both are same, so do not get confused. So in the wide area network, each and every computer will be given a unique identity. For example, in your school or college, you will be given a unique identity. Now that unique identity is called your roll number, because what happens, your name can be identical but your roll number has to be unique. Similarly, when a computer or any device wants to connect to the outside world, then there has to be a unique identity so that it can be recognized. So that is why in the network, or you can call it in the wide area network, each and every device will be given a unique identity, and that unique identity is called an IP address. So let's see how the IP address looks like. So this is how the IP address looks like. I have taken a random IP address. Now IP address will be divided into 4 parts, and each part will be separated by a comma, or you can call it period. Now each part will be having 8 bit, okay, 8 bits. Each part will be having 8 bits, so 8 multiplied by 4 become 32 bits long. So IP address is a 32-bit long decimal number separated by comma. Now IP address possesses 3 important information. One is class type, second is network ID, and the third one is host ID. IP address, again I'm repeating, these 32 bits possesses 3 important information: class type, network ID, and the host ID. So we're gonna see this one by one. Now class type can be easily determined by the look at the first section of an IP address, because what happened, IP address has been divided into 4 parts. So after looking at the first part only, you would get to know what class type that IP address belongs to. Now as you can see the range of classes. Now if an IP address falls under 1 to 127, then it will be considered class A type. If an IP address falls under 128 to 191, then it will be considered class B. So as you can see that the first section of this IP address, it says 10. So 10 falls under 1 to 127. So obviously this belongs to class A. Now 170. Now 170 falls under 128 to 191. So that IP address belongs to class B. And then this IP address first section is 195, which falls under 192 to 223. So it falls under class C, and so on. So as you can see that after just looking at the first section of an IP address, you can recognize which class that IP address belongs to. Now we're gonna see what is network ID. So what is network ID? Now network ID, the name itself suggests that ID of the network, because what happened in the internet, there are different network available. For example, let's say Airtel or BSNL or Jio, different network available. So each and every network will be given a unique identity. Now that unique identity is called network ID. Now please remember that network ID will be taken or encapsulated from IP address, so do not get confused. Now you might be wondering that why was the network ID encapsulated in an IP address? Now what happened, at the router different packet arrive from different network. Now how would router knows that where is the packet coming from and where I need to forward this packet, who is the owner of that packet and where I need to forward this packet to. For example, as you can see that different packet are coming from, let's say, from Airtel or Jio network or BSNL network. So how would router identifies who is the owner of that particular packet or data and where I need to forward this packet? Now without having the network ID, router would not be able to find the best route possible for the packet, or you can call it data, to be delivered from source to destination as soon as possible. For example, like Google Map, Google Map helps you to determine the best route possible, less congested route, so that you would be able to reach to your destination as soon as possible. Similarly, router helps a packet to determine the best route possible so that a packet get delivered to its destination as soon as possible. So that is why network ID has been encapsulated in the IP address. Now what is host ID? Now host ID is a device connected to a particular network, whether it is Airtel or Jio or BSNL or any other network, a device which is connected to that particular network only. So the host ID tells that this particular device is associated or linked with that particular network. So now we're gonna see how to calculate network ID and the host ID from an IP address. Now to calculate network ID and the host ID, we need to understand about prefix. Now prefix tells you that how many parts from an IP address will be taken for network ID. We're gonna see this with the help of examples. Let's say this is an IP address that you need to calculate network ID and the host ID. Now first of all, you need to find out the class type. Now that IP address belongs to class A, okay, because it falls under 1 to 127, okay, as you can see in the picture. Now this IP address belongs to class A. Then we see the prefix. Okay, now prefix of class A says that 0. Now please pay attention. Now 0 says that how many parts will be taken from an IP address. Now IP address has been divided into 4 parts. So 0 says that only 1 part will be taken for network ID. And 1 part is of 8-bit, right? So 8-bit from an IP address will be taken for network ID. Now 0 will be added at the very front of the 32 bits, okay? Now all the remaining bits after the first bit, because first bit is reserved for prefix, and those 7 bits will be considered as network ID, and all these remaining bits will be considered as host ID. Now we have 2 raised to the power 7 network and 2 raised to the power 32 minus 8 is 24 bits are reserved for host ID. So what does it mean? It means that 16 millions unique IP addresses will be provided in class A. So that is why large organization like internet service provider like Airtel or BSNL or Jio, big organization needs lots of unique IP addresses. So that is why if you have a big organization, you should go for class A. Let's take one more example. So this time let's say 195.1.1.1, okay? Now first of all we need to determine or identify the class type for the prefix section. Now that IP address belongs to class C, okay, because it falls under 192.223. okay. Now we know the class type. Now the prefix of the class C type is 110. Means, what does that mean? It means that 3 parts from an IP address will be taken for network ID, because IP address divided into 4 parts, so 3 parts will be taken for network ID. 3 parts means that 8 multiplied by 3 become 24. So 24 bits are reserved for network ID. But please wait. Now this is the prefix 110. So 110 will be added as a prefix, and remaining bits will be considered as or taken as network ID, and remaining these will be considered as host ID. So we have 24 minus 3 become 21. So 2 raised to the power 21 network ID. And host, how many hosts we have? We have 2 raised to the power 8 hosts. Okay. Now please remember one more important thing, which is how many parts are reserved for network ID from 32 bits, or how many parts are reserved from 32 bits for host ID depends on class type. Okay, depends on the prefix, how many bits will be taken for network ID or host ID. So if you have a medium to large organization, you can go for class B, where 65,534 unique IP addresses has been provided per network. And let's say if you have a small organization like at your home or school or college, where you do not need lots of unique IP addresses, so there will be 255 unique IP addresses will be provided per network. Okay, so I believe that I am able to make you understand what is IP address and their classification. So if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching.